China Current is a weekly news talk show from China to the world. We cover viral news about China every week and also give you the newest updates on China's cutting-edge technologies. Let's get started. Okay, so we want our show to be a little window to today's China, but if you really want to take a peek into China's future, you might want to see The Wandering Earth 2, a Chinese sci-fi blockbuster premiered recently. And besides China, it's currently available in countries like the US, the UK, Canada, Australia, and will come to emerging markets like Korea, Indonesia, Russia, the Middle East, and Africa. As of 5th February, The Wandering Earth 2 has collected more than 3 billion yuan, or $500 million, making it one of the top earners in China's film history. This is remarkable because it's uncommon for a sequel film, or in this case, a prequel, to perform just as well or even better than the original, as filmgoers need to be familiar with the backstory to be able to fully enjoy it. It wouldn't be much of a barrier if you are into stuff like drone battles, artificial intelligence, and nuclear explosions. The film hits all the right spots and will immediately suck you in. But, I'm not an avid sci-fi fan. Call me superficial, but I personally prefer fantasy thrillers, peppered with old-school fistfights or ancient battle scenes with men cut each other down with swords. But still, I highly recommend this film. Why? 4 reasons. First, it offers a glimpse of the Chinese mind. Humanity facing apocalyptic disasters has been an eternal fountain of inspiration for science fiction. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of books and films featuring a similar setting, but more often than not, they feature elements of messianism. In other words, the world is saved by the chosen few, or it is beyond saving, then those few will be charged with the mission to preserve the seeds of hope on behalf of the entire human species. The key difference lies in the angles of how history is viewed. We Chinese people tend to see it from below, not from above. It's not that we don't respect heroes, but our faith lies with man, not God, or godlike individuals. The mentality is that we could be powerless on our own, but collectively we can move mountains, or pull the earth away from its orbit. Such an amazing feat would demand effort and sacrifice from all, so much so that personal tales become less important. This is precisely why many Western viewers find the storyline of Wandering Earth a little messy, plot rhythm poorly paced, major characters underdeveloped, lacking credible motives. At 3 hours long, the film does get a bit tiring, especially for those watching a franchise for the first time. So that's all very fair criticism for a commercial film. But if you reimagine it as a historical documentary made in the distant future about our near future, exactly as the Hugo-winning author of the original novel Liu Cixin had intended, perhaps its aloofness would become understandable. And all those meticulous yet seemingly redundant labels of time, people, places, and even equipment will start to make sense. Instead of allowing the story to explore the personal, delving into their emotional depths, what matters the most is answering the 5W1H questions. The film is little more than a record of who's doing what at what time and where, resembling analytic historiography. Foreign audience may get a little uncomfortable with this narrative style, but we find it familiar. A lot of Chinese history books, even literary classics, such as The Romance of Three Kingdoms, are written in this form. Also, this film is premised on an alternative, very Chinese concept of home. Frank Guo, the director of Wandering Earth, remembers being asked by an American producer, "Why would you take the Earth with you when you're trying to escape, especially if there's a huge crisis out there?" The answer to that question, I think, lies in our connotation of home. Unlike nomadic or seafaring nations, the Chinese civilization had become and remained largely sedentary for millennia. We attach so much emotional value to the actual land we dwell upon that our sense of belonging becomes rooted in geography. Home is more than the nuclear family, even more than the sum of all kinship bonds. It's in the creeks, the trees, the streets of our hometowns. the community, the memory, all form a part of our spiritual being. There is no manifest destiny for us to emigrate to a new promised land, so our best shot facing total destruction will be carrying our homes on our backs just like snails. So I'm actually quite pleased to see The Wandering Earth striking a good balance between the epic and the romantic, the two cultural and spiritual cores of the Chinese nation. And secondly, I think it reflects the epochal change in China's comprehensive power. No point bragging about something and taking a part in, but despite being a very popular genre, science fiction, especially of hardcore nature, is not something that every country is capable of producing. I consider it to be the crown jewel of all fiction. Why? Because imagination is not chimeric fantasy, but an ability to mentally extrapolate beyond what is known and normal. Therefore, needs to be firmly grounded in reality. Anyone is free to cook up stories about space adventures, but you wouldn't know what it takes to make those stories sound credible to trained ears. Technical details could easily give you away, degrading the whole thing to a second-rate melodrama. And in the case of The Wandering Earth, the aesthetics place such a heavy emphasis on showing the nuts and bolts of all those massive infrastructure projects to the point of becoming a little fetishistic. Think about the planetary engines or the space elevator, and you'll realize that even if the science part is merely a vehicle of expression for the fiction part, it's what sets the genre apart from other forms of cultural products that require less scientific and engineering knowledge to make. And more interestingly, if the society hadn't already moved into a high-tech stage, there wouldn't be a huge demand for hardcore sci-fi, and people wouldn't be able to cultivate a good taste for sci-fi works. So the very fact that China's young generation overwhelmingly loves the film speaks volumes about how far we had come and how much further we can possibly go. In this regard, I'm really glad that, and it brings me to the third point about how the film's reception in China informs us of the advent of a new, stereotype-defying, forward and outward-looking generation. Up till now, China's vision of an idealized self has stemmed from the restoration of the past. Think of government slogans such as the Great Rejuvenation of the Chinese nation, frequently interpreted as seeking to return to a rightful place in history. Western China hand would immediately think of the ancient tributary system and be cautious about its geopolitical ambitions. But actually, it's our intellectual tradition to dream up the present after the past that is deemed to be uncorrupted, virtuous, and eternal. We lived in the memory of the good old days of the ancient dynasties, the grandeur of Tang, the glory of Han, the rights of Zhou, and the governance of even more ancient sage kings. That's essentially to make China great again. But this habit is not distinctively Chinese. The Arabs, the Persians, the Turks, when they dream of an ideal world, they look back to a bygone golden age. The only exception used to be the West, who had been propelled by rounds of industrial revolution enabled by progress in science and technology to constantly expand the frontier of civilization. Only the West, especially America, equipped with state-of-the-art tools, was able to walk its way confidently without blessing and burden of history. The rest of the world could only kill their envy with vain pride, hoping to retreat to the past to lead an idyllic life or to fight injustice as a knight-errant. That was teenage me being carried away by wuxia novels, but I didn't grow an interest in sci-fi literature back then because most stories were poorly written, shallow, and irrelevant. It says a thing or two about the general development level of society if boys are less interested in laser guns and gravity cannons than spears and arrows. But China has quickly, in a matter of decades, risen from an agrarian society to an industrial power. Such a great transformation paved the way for a cultural shift. Emboldened by national progress, China's teenagers and young adults are much more future-facing in imagining their roles in the new world. They're no longer satisfied with books and films featuring kung fu masters, royal concubines, or court intrigues. In a popular saying among the Gen Z of China, they will set out to conquer the sea of stars. There they have it, the Wandering Earth series, a space epic with Chinese characteristics tailored to their liking. The sheer audacity of the film reminds me of many sci-fi landmarks that it pays tribute as the story unfolds. It's not hard to see that in recent decades, the bulk of Western sci-fi had turned increasingly introspective in their overarching themes. It's not uncommon to find skeptical, cynical, or even dystopian view of technology and more nuanced probe of human nature. Actually, the original novel of The Wandering Earth has a mockingly tragic ending, and I happen to like it very much. I suspect the future film adaptation will depart from the novel in a major way, but most likely fans will still be pleased. In a way, China is like a new kid on the block, excitingly waving his impressive toys, anxiously trying to prove himself. Criticize what you like, but ultimately, we all need youthfulness and optimism to move humanity forward. And that leaves me with the final point, the surrealism of the film. For me, it's quite clear that many sci-fi masterpieces, Dune, Avatar, and Interstellar, just to name a few, strongly allude to Western history and religion. So those stories naturally seep into viewers' consciousness to echo with what they already know. Just as Isaac Asimov once remarked, sci-fi is the reaction of human beings to changes in science and technology. And the flip side of the coin is, it's the same old human beings. You don't find the characters' emotion and choices drastically different from what we see every day. And the lack of strangeness and surprise is usually made up by high-tech environment. However, The Wandering Earth is nothing like that. I'm reluctant to actually use the word human fiction rather than science fiction, but what I find most surreal about the story has nothing to do with the technical feasibility of moving the Earth or anything like that. It comes from the improbability of human race coming together to solve a common crisis and be willing to be held accountable for our future generations 2,500 years down the way. Hey, we couldn't even deal with COVID, when at the beginning all it required was enforcing a 2-week-long quarantine. And look at the international solidarity the film presents and how countries brutalize each other in real life. The more unbelievable I find about the Wandering Earth story to be, the more humbled and hopeful that I become. The film is such a powerful reminder of the possibility that better versions of ourselves exist, just like aliens. With that, I thank you for watching this episode of China Currents. If you want to learn more about China or have any thoughts and comments on our show, please contact us at the email address below. Looking forward to hearing from you.